We're delighted to be able to talk to you now about our research, educational research. As you can see, it's the normal sort of stuff we do. And this is a study of sending medical students to sea. Hence the name At Sea with Disability. Now, the context for this research is that rounded medical education, as you probably all know, is about knowledge, skills and attitudes. It's about head, hands and heart, as you might say. And of these three, the hardest to identify, the hardest to teach, and certainly the hardest to assess is attitudinal learning. And yet attitudes have a tremendous impact on clinical outcomes, on patient satisfaction, and certainly on patient dissatisfaction. And examples of the sorts of attitudes that we might want to see in medicine include open-mindedness, compassion, curiosity, sensitivity to feedback and that sort of thing. And attitudinal learning occurs, we think, through what we call the hidden curriculum. Copying your teachers, copying your peers, copying the general mores of your Glenical's student society, for instance. But this sort of way of learning attitudes doesn't actually require the students to think directly about their attitudes, which can quite easily escape under the radar and appear in unexpected ways. So we have developed here an educational intervention which is specifically designed to address these attitudinal learning objectives, and in this case, with particular emphasis on attitudes to disability.
Thank you. So for 30 years now, the Jubilee Sailing Trust has been providing adventures under sail for disabled and non-disabled sailors who voyage together in pairs, buddying each other as they journey around the coast of the UK and further afield. And we've been offering on the SSC programme the tour ship voyage also now for 4 years. So assignments and feedback from these voyages suggested such rich attitudinal learning that we decided we'd try and find a theoretical framework which would help us capture this very unusual learning experience. And as you'll see in a moment, we came to Mazzero's theory of transformative learning. Mazzero has developed a really rich way of processing how adult learners actually investigate their own transformative, sort of taken for granted attitudes within an educational context. And he describes various aspects of the transformative learning, and we're going to look at a few of them now. The first one, the frames of reference. So these, I suppose they correspond to attitude most closely, really. The frame of reference Mazzero describes as being the structure of assumptions and expectations through which we filter sense impressions. And these are often subconscious, culturally assimilated, and perhaps don't actually emerge until within the transformative learning situation or context. Second one, disorientating dilemmas, many of these, is a practical, real-life situations where people are challenged. They challenge themselves, they're challenged by others, challenge their beliefs. And then when we come to critical reflection, where the learners are actively questioning deeply held assumptions, and that's often in relation to the disorientating dilemmas. Dialogue with others, very important in terms of active discussion of issues and others, active discussion of issues with others engaged in the same learning environment.
Right, so the aim of this research was to better understand from the views and experiences of this unusual cohort of medical students the nature of the attitudinal learning associated with At Sea with Disability, and in particular these aspects. We were asking, do students articulate their frames of reference, their attitudes? Do they encounter disorientating dilemmas? Is critical reflection a key part of any change of attitude that might occur? And finally, was the dialogue with other sailors, particularly disabled sailors, important? And we sought to develop this understanding to answer some of the internationally perceived limitations in disability teaching within our medical schools.
So the study consisted of a thematic analysis of the data collected before, during and after the JST voyages on 2010 and 2011. Ethical approval was obtained and all the participants gave written consent. So the study sample consisted of 16 students, 4 from each of the 4 voyages. And the data comprised of audio diaries on board, formal written narratives, and then focus group transcripts, really. So all the audio data was taken in and transcribed. Okay, so in this presentation, we're going to offer some quotations which illustrate different aspects of transformative learning theory. Our larger analysis obviously covers additional aspects of that, is more nuanced and will includes disconfirming examples, etc. But for today, we're putting the focus on how the quotations link in with the points that we've pulled out here. So, frames of reference. Some students explicitly shared the attitudes of disability that they brought to the voyage. These tended to focus on the fraught business of helping.
Okay, my parents are both social workers. I've worked with children from single-parent families and young people with learning difficulties. I know all about seeing the person, not just the disability. Yet I arrived on board ship expecting to assist my buddy, a disabled person. Disorientating dilemmas.
Often the students were confronted with situations that challenge their conceptions of how to be with a disabled person. George, for instance, recounts how he learned the perils of being helpful.
And the first mate specifically asked the girl I was with to take a line and tie it up. And I went to go over and to do it instinctively. And instinctively, I leapt in and tried to take over. And the mate grabbed me by the arm, pulled me back and was like, "Not you, her." And I suddenly just stopped. It was a bit of a shock, actually. I didn't even notice I was doing it. Critical reflection. Transformative learning theory would predict that the transforming student will show evidence of thinking through their own processes as they encounter these sorts of challenges on the voyage. The audio diaries provide a rich seam of such critical reflection. This student reflects on the learning she found in being constrained by her buddy during shore leave.
Came into Boulogne itching to go exploring. I found it frustrating at first because I wanted to go on my own and or with some of the other girls I've met and hang out with people my own age and be kind of free. But then I realised this was ridiculous and I was surprised at how much I resented the tie of having to walk more slowly.
So now we come to dialogue with others. So transformational learning theory predicts that transformation occurs when people talk together about what is important. The voyage and the seminars have provided lots of opportunity to do this, and the students reflected on the quality of the conversations on the ship.
There was no obligation for them to tell me anything like this, or me to ask anything. It's just what the conversations turned into. It's their stories. I didn't go into it expecting it to be a life-changing event. It was a lot more intense than I thought it would be. So, an aspect of transformational learning not discussed so far is the way in which these revised changes in frames of reference might alter how learners act in professional settings. This cannot be inferred from the data, but learning of potential clinical relevance was commonly voiced by our students. And here's just some examples of this.
Okay, so firstly, challenging the us and them tension between doctors and disabled persons.
Disabled people are basically exactly the same as us, other than that they have a little bit of difficulty getting around. Post-voyage seminar. Gaining insight into the second aspect of how this might influence the clinical futures, gaining insight into the complex social context of disability.
Carers are a hugely important group of people who we often meet as doctors, and I can now really see the benefits of interacting with both the carer as an individual and I can now really see the benefit of interacting with the carer as an individual, not purely as an addition to the patient. Another example. He also has to constantly be grateful for everything. He has to thank people all day, every day, for doing the simplest things he can't do. The third section we're going to look at now, learning to understand and individualise the needs of disabled persons.
Two people with MS can be very different people, can have very, very separate needs. Audio recording, 2011. Fourthly, learning the importance of hearing people's stories.
You've got to let people discover what they're trying to say, or you've got to let people say what they want to say, even if you don't agree with it. And the fifth point that we're looking at, allowing themselves to be inspired by the abilities of their disabled buddies.
I enjoyed working in partnership with my buddy, who had a brilliant working knowledge of the mechanics of sailing and proved to be a patient and excellent teacher. So, to conclude, we have used Maziro's transformative learning to interrogate the learning experiences of this group of students who've been out at sea. Our data suggests that students' attitudes to disability can change during these voyages in ways that might lead, to quote Maziro, to more inclusive, discriminative and open action in the world. Confidence in our conclusions is increased by our use of audio diaries. And on our full write-up, we highlight several different ways in which these findings could be transferred to terrestrial disability teaching in the medical schools.
So we'd like to thank Professor Chris Salisbury and the SWGPT for funding this study, and also the JST for supporting the data collection. Dr. Val Williams was very helpful to us in terms of the methodological support and also with her close knowledge of the disability literature. This was a great sort of dovetailing, really. So we're drafting two publications at the moment, one which explores transformational learning theory, transformative learning theory, and the other coming from the disability perspective, looking at how the voyage itself is enabling for the disabled.
And finally, we'd just like to show you a series of photographs which were taken by Lucy Morgan, one of our students, from the boat. This is a pair of brothers. The brother on the right has done over 20 voyages with JST. A lot of people enjoy climbing up the masts. But folk in wheelchairs also get that same opportunity.
And of all people, walking with walking sticks, people walking in people in wheelchairs, and it was just, we I think as a group all really gelled, and really for me it's the whole experience was the first time I've actually really spent any serious amount of time with disabled people in such a kind of prolonged exposure, and it was just quite eye-opening. But yeah, this little French town didn't know what hit them when Tenacious came in the dock.
We were in town.
And so, yeah, that was it. At Sea with Disability.